The Black Archive.
At 6:30 in the morning on November 8, 1942, American troops huddled behind the sand dunes near Fadala Beach in Morocco as enemy tanks advanced toward them. Many of the soldiers had only recently finished basic training and were carrying strange new weapons they had never handled before. The weapon was a long metal tube, roughly 4.5 feet in length. Someone had nicknamed it the bazooka. The launchers had been distributed the night before the invasion without proper instructions, training, or even a demonstration of how they worked. Officers simply handed out the tubes and rockets and told the men they could destroy tanks. The cold morning air mixed with smoke drifting from burning vehicles along the shoreline. Salt from the Mediterranean hung in the wind while machine gun fire rattled across the beach. American .30 caliber weapons barked rapidly while enemy guns answered with slower bursts. Offshore, destroyers fired heavy naval shells over the landing zones as French Renault tanks rolled steadily toward the American lines. The infantry had no artillery nearby, no anti-tank cannons, only rifles, grenades, and these unfamiliar rocket launchers that supposedly carried the force of heavy artillery. The tanks closed the distance quickly, their tracks tearing through wet sand while their turrets slowly rotated towards scattered American positions. Soldiers lifted the launchers onto their shoulders, aimed nervously and squeezed the triggers. Nothing. They tried again. Still nothing. Now the tanks were even closer, engines roaring, gun barrels swinging toward them. Men frantically checked wires and rockets, trying to remember the little information they had been given. Fingers traced the connections. Triggers were yanked harder in desperation. The bazookas still refused to fire. Some soldiers threw the useless tubes into the sand and ran for cover as enemy machine guns sprayed the beach. Wet sand exploded around them while bullets snapped overhead. Men flattened themselves into shallow trenches, breathing hard, surviving only because the tanks shifted their attention elsewhere. What none of those soldiers realized was that they were carrying weapons that would continue failing American troops across North Africa for months. These launchers were supposed to revolutionize infantry warfare, yet instead they left soldiers helpless against enemy armor. Worse still, the Germans would later capture these weapons, improve them, and transform them into something far deadlier than the Americans had. Originally built, this is the story of how the United States Army entered battle with anti-tank weapons that often would not even fire, and how those failures forced engineers to redesign the bazooka into one of the most important infantry weapons of World War II. The origins of the bazooka stretch back to 1918, when physicist Robert Goddard demonstrated a tube-fired rocket system for the U.S. Army Signal Corps at Aberdeen, proving ground just days before World War I ended. Once peace arrived, military interest in rockets disappeared and the project was forgotten. For the next 20 years, the Army paid little attention to portable rocket weapons. Infantry relied on rifles, machine guns, and artillery, while tanks were still viewed as unreliable machines that broke down constantly. Few officers believed infantry needed dedicated anti-tank weapons. That changed when Germany unleashed blitzkrieg warfare. In 1939, German armored divisions crushed Poland in weeks. Soon afterward, France collapsed, and British forces were driven into evacuation at Dunkirk. Tanks had transformed modern warfare, and the United States suddenly realized its infantry had almost nothing capable of stopping modern armor. The standard American anti-tank gun was the 37mm cannon. It required several men to operate, had to be towed into position, and was becoming ineffective against newer German tanks with thicker armor. Infantry also had anti-tank grenades, but using them meant getting within throwing distance of a tank, essentially a suicide mission against vehicles covered in machine guns. Major Leslie Skinner believed rockets offered the solution. Throughout the 1930s, he experimented with attaching rocket motors to shaped charge grenades, hoping to create a weapon infantry could carry themselves. The problem was weight. The Army's most powerful anti-tank grenade, the M10, weighed nearly 4 pounds. It could penetrate thick armor, but no soldier could throw it accurately. Army manuals actually instructed soldiers to run up to enemy tanks and place the grenade directly onto the armor and that desperate tactic showed just how serious the problem had become. In early 1942, Skinner received a young assistant named Edward Ohl, a 24-year-old engineering physics graduate assigned to the Ordnance Corps after Pearl Harbor. Skinner gave him a difficult mission: find a way for one infantryman to accurately launch a heavy-shaped charge grenade. Chell spent weeks sketching ideas and testing designs. Every concept failed. Either the grenade was too heavy or the rocket exhaust endangered the shooter. Then one day at Aberdeen Proving Ground, Ohl noticed a discarded metal tube lying in a scrap pile. It happened to match the diameter of the M10 grenade almost perfectly. The idea hit him instantly: put the rocket grenade inside the tube and fire it from a soldier's shoulder. The tube would safely direct the exhaust behind the operator while launching the projectile forward. HL rushed back to the workshop and explained the concept to Skinner. Together, they quickly assembled a prototype using a simple tube, a wooden shoulder stock, batteries for ignition, and crude iron sights. The first test launch sent a rocket flying cleanly across the proving ground. It worked. Over the following weeks, they refined the design and brought it to a competition against other anti-tank weapon concepts. During testing, they realized they had forgotten to install proper sights. Skinner grabbed a wire coat hanger, bent it into shape, and attached it to the launcher minutes before the demonstration. Despite the improvised sight, the launcher outperformed every competing design. When senior officers arrived to watch, General Gladian Barnes personally fired the weapon and hit the target tank twice. The demonstration impressed Army leadership so much that within hours, an order for 5,000 launchers was approved by George C. Marshall. During testing, one officer joked that the launcher resembled the homemade musical instrument used by comedian Bob Burns, called a bazooka. The nickname stuck immediately. Officially, the weapon was the M1 rocket launcher. But from that point on, everyone simply called it the bazooka.